I remember him before the lights got brighter. South Philadelphia tracked across my boards in saddle shoes and nervous laughter, but Edward Tex Connor stepped on like he already knew my grain. He didn't stomp, he listened. Weight soft over the balls of his feet, elbows honest, lead offered like a promise. Under Bob Horn's local hum, he traced tidy diagonals. When Dick Clark's sheen arrived, he didn't change his voice, only the volume. The louder the cameras, the quieter his control. Most afternoons, he brought Janet Hamill, and together they wrote complete sentences: breath, turn, recovery, release. On a rare orbit, he caught a phrase with Justine Carrelli, proof that steadiness travels. Others chased air. Tex conserved it, spending only what the music could repay. Kids 1,000 miles away learned me by watching him, how to hold a partner without holding them back, how to make space for a melody to land. If stars are flashes, Tex was infrastructure, and every good night needs a strong foundation. Before the name bandstand meant a national ritual, it was a Philly habit, a studio that smelled faintly of dusted floor wax and warm tubes, a clock that moved in 45 RPM increments. Under Bob Horn, the show felt handmade, cables coiled like sleeping snakes, cue cards with corners dog-eared, a host's voice riding the same frequency as the house band's cymbals. Teenagers crowded the periphery with the jittery confidence of kids who knew they were inventing something without knowing what to call it. Edward Tex Connor arrived in that room not as a comet but as a compass. He read the boards before he read the camera, practicing the small ethics that keep social dance civil. Protect your partner, keep your line, answer the music instead of interrupting it. Then the aperture widened. Dick Clark took the chair, the lights went cleaner, the camera moved smoother, and Philadelphia's afternoon habit began speaking to the whole country. The floor didn't change, the stakes did. Where Horn's pulse invited a neighborhood, Clark's polish invited a nation. Suddenly your step might be copied in Nebraska by Friday. In that shift, some kids chased the lens and burned out. Others learned to breathe inside the brightness. Tex breathed. He didn't decorate more, he edited better. His breaks landed where the backbeat felt inevitable. His traveling steps shortened by a whisper to suit wider pullbacks. He kept the diagonal to the lens without sacrificing the diagonal to his partner. It looked simple because he had done the hard work of subtraction. You could hear the era in the music choices too. Velvet slow dance crooners soaking the grain one afternoon, a pop rocket jitterbug slicing it the next. The show's geometry adjusted, sharper cranes, cleaner reveals. But Tex treated production like weather. Note it, dress for it, don't argue with it. He became a kind of floor infrastructure, the quiet steel that lets bolder shapes hang safely in the air. If someone's spin over-traveled, he re-centered the axis. If the cut came early, he landed them clean on the next breath. Viewers at home rarely see that kind of rescue. Partners never forget it. What makes a dancer survive an era change isn't flash, it's sentence structure. Under Horn, Tex learned grammar, where the comma goes, where the period absolutely must. Under Clark, he learned diction, the clarity that carries through static and distance. Together, they made a voice. And as the program's footprint grew, postcards arriving from towns he'd never visit, letters naming him and Janet in the same exhaled line, Tex kept answering the same prompt the floor had asked him on day one. Can you listen closely enough to make someone else look good? By the time the rest of America recognized the ritual, he was already fluent. The set evolved, the nation leaned in, and the boy from South Philly simply tuned his instrument to the brighter room. The note he played didn't get louder. It got truer. Some pairs burned like a match. Tex Connor and Janet Hamill glowed like a pilot light, steady, ready, warming the room before the music even started. What made them compelling wasn't a single stunt or a miracle spin. It was the way the steps connected, the way one clean phrase prepared the next. Janet's carriage had that poised elasticity dancers chase for years, shoulders quiet, breath available, an axis that could take a change of plan without advertising the adjustment. Tex met that poise with economy. His lead hand didn't tug, it invited. His frame didn't fence her in, it gave her a lane. Together they drew diagonals the camera loved, lines that made sense to the eye and, more importantly, to the partner who had to live inside them. You can hear their range in the soundtrack the show threw at them. On a velvet slow dance afternoon, when a crooner laid a soft ribbon over the floor, they wrote long sentences. weight passing like a note from one hand to the other, breaks arriving with the understatement of a nod. Then the very next day, the needle might drop on a pop rocket, and they'd trade ribbon for spark, tightening footwork, brightening accents, still landing everything within the same grammar. That's the secret of couples who last. The punctuation stays consistent even when the vocabulary changes. Around them, the studio mischief never stopped. Cue screams from the bleachers, a cable creeping into frame, a camera pulling wide just when you plan to travel. Tex's answer to chaos was subtraction, fewer flourishes, clearer lanes, an extra half-beat of breath before the rejoin. Janet's answer was trust. Watch any still of them and you'll see it. The micro-tilt toward his center, the relaxed right hand, the eyes willing to leave the floor because the floor is being handled. Television loves dazzle, but what it rewards over time is legibility. Tex and Janet were readable. Kids in kitchens far from Philadelphia could imitate them without humiliation, and that meant copycat miracles by Friday night. Off-floor, their chemistry had the good manners of real companionship. Jokes that don't need volume, the casual choreography of two people navigating doors and bus aisles. On floor, that familiarity translated into a kind of insurance policy. If a song ran a hair short, they could compress without panic. If a spin leaked momentum, Tex would find the axis and Janet would finish the sentence. Those rescues rarely make the highlight reel. They do make a culture. Bandstand asked teenagers to show America how to be young in public. Tex and Janet answered by making Young look composed. When the applause ebbed and the host's voice returned, the room seemed to exhale a little easier. Not because something spectacular had happened, but because something dependable had. The couple in the center had kept time, and keeping time, quietly, accurately together, is how a generation learned to begin. Contest nights felt different the moment you walked in. The air had an electrical burr, as if the room knew it would be asked to choose. Clipboards appeared. Judges took their perches above the floor like lifeguards scanning a crowded pool. The band, or the turntable, sharpened its edges. And teenagers who'd been easy with each other all week suddenly carried their nerves in the shoulders. This was choreography plus consequence, same floor, higher gravity. Tex Connor and Janet Hamill never treated contests as detours. They treated them as audits. Could you make the same clean sense at a pressure cooker tempo? Could you keep your axis quiet when your breath wanted to run? 1958 answered softly. Earl Grant's The End seeped across the boards like low tide, and the slow dance finals became a study in restraint. Tex and Janet didn't overinterpret. They clarified. Weight changes passed like notes under a door. Their bronze felt less like third place than like a certificate in legibility. These lines read, "It was the kind of result that makes judges nod. No fireworks, just grammar you can trust." 1959 arrived with a firecracker in its pocket. Tallahassee Lassie hit the needle, and the floor snapped from velvet to spark. Jitterbug asks for a different metabolism. Tighter travel, brighter accents, breaks that behave like commas instead of ellipses. Tex shortened the stride without crowding Janet's lane. His lead hand became a metronome with manners. Janet answered with spring, hips anchored, feet doing shorthand the camera loved. Silver this time. Second place in a room that had decided to sprint. When the cut came, they were still inside the sentence, breathing hard but never out of breath. The prizes framed it all in mid-century Technicolor. A backyard in-ground pool promised to turn some cul-de-sac into summer cinema. A French Simca, chrome trim glinting like a symbol under studio lights, whispered of autonomy with a steering wheel. Bandstand's bounty wasn't just loot, it was a mood board for American wanting. Kids who took city buses past row houses watched teenagers flirt with the trappings of after-school prosperity. You didn't need to win the car to feel the engine under your feet. Hold a beat on two, maybe you can hold a life in place. But the secret of contest nights wasn't the scoreboard, it was the rescues. Cameras widened just as you meant to travel. A cable moved like a tide, a spin over-traveled by an inch. In those inches, Tex earned his reputation. He re-centered axes, offered an extra half-breath before the rejoin, landed the phrase exactly where the next measure needed it. Television doesn't annotate those saves. Partners remember them forever. The applause arrived, the close-up passed, cue cards waved, and the room slid back into its weekday heartbeat. What remained was proof that competence can feel like thrill when you put it under lights. If you build the sequence today, put the trophies in the wide, the teenagers in the medium, and the hands in the close. The hands tell you everything: invite, anchor, release. And somewhere in that choreography of small decisions sits a boy from South Philly, editing the night until it makes sense. Some stories don't shout, they flicker. A single frame, a marginal note, a rumor that turns into evidence when the right photograph surfaces. In the archive of American Bandstand, Edward Tex Connor is written in full sentences beside Janet Hamill. And then one day, the film edits itself. There's Justine Carrelli under the lights, the posture every kid tried to copy in the mirror, and beside her, calm, economical, unmistakable, Tex. The pairing is not a plot twist, it's a compass point. It tells you the floor was a living map where paths crossed and craft traveled. Freeze it at the first contact. Tex's right hand is exactly where it belongs, support without insistence. Justine's axis is quiet, ready to spin but in no hurry to prove she can. They are not auditioning each other, they are negotiating time, agreeing on a sentence before they speak it aloud. The music gives them a lane, and they don't waste any of it. There's no duel of signatures here. Justine keeps her carriage, Tex keeps his restraint. What changes is the geometry of trust. Two reputations meeting in the shared grammar of a single phrase. For a viewer at home in 1959, the moment would have passed like a breath. You were there for the song, for the gloss, for the laugh you could hear more than see. Only later does the frame acquire voltage, when fan scrapbooks are opened, when penciled captions line up names, when memory keepers start comparing angles. That's when the image begins to speak in a lower register. It says that icons are not cages. It says that good partners are good partners, period. It says that steadiness, the talent Tex practiced until it looked like modesty, can be borrowed by another star and returned without a crease. Editors love a reveal, and this one earns its quiet. Build your sequence with Tex and Janet first, the clean diagonals, the contest stills, the smiles that look like exhale. Then, let the room tone in. Cut to the rare frame with Justine and hold a beat longer than comfort allows. No sting, no drum roll. Let the audience discover what the dancers already know, that the floor rewards those who listen. In the silence, you can almost hear the studio itself, the mic chatter, the cable drag, a laugh at the edge of the set, and underneath it all, the click of two people finding the same count. What makes the picture valuable isn't the novelty, it's the affirmation. Bandstand's mythology is full of magnetic duets that never broke, and the devotion deserves the pedestal. But the culture was bigger than its pedestals. It was a commons where the best habits could migrate, where etiquette was technique, where a quiet lead could make anyone look a little more like themselves. That's the lesson inside the frame. The rarest thing about it is not who's dancing with whom, it's how generous the dance can be when two professionals share a sentence and let the period land on time. South Philadelphia did not teach dance so much as it taught proportions. Narrow streets disciplined your stride, rowhouse parlors trained your turns to respect furniture and family. The neighborhood's acoustics, buses sighing at corners, a trumpet leaking from a third-floor window, the offbeat thud of a slammed screen door, wrote tempo into the body. Edward Tex Connor learned there that elegance begins as etiquette. You don't take space you can't return. You don't start a phrase you can't land. Before the cameras, before the cue lights, there were kitchens with linoleum that scuffed into compass roses, church basements with floors that answered back, school gyms whose echo told you instantly if your timing was honest. He grew up among kids who understood that style was a public service. You kept your laces tight and your elbows honest because somebody else had to share your radius. The stoops taught posture. Wait forward enough to listen, back enough to last. The corner stores taught patience. Count exact change, count exact beats. Even the buses coached him how to balance when the driver hit a curve, how to plant through a stop without throwing the person beside you. Later, those reflexes would look like grace on television. On the floor, they looked like respect. When you watch Tex, if only in the mental edit that memory allows, you see the South Philly syllabus expressed as choice after small choice. His traveling steps are abbreviated, never crowding the lane. His lead hand is a promise rather than a pull. He turns like someone who has rehearsed in rooms with low ceilings. The breaks arrive with the clean usefulness of a comma, a breath that makes the sentence easier to read. Nothing about it is showy, everything about it is legible. Legibility becomes its own charisma when the camera is close and the nation is learning how to be young in public without knocking over the furniture. Community wrapped those lessons in companionship. Brothers, neighbors, the loose team of teenagers who split car fare and shared sandwiches between classes, they formed the soft infrastructure that gets kids to studios on time. That infrastructure also policed the unspoken rules. Protect your partner, protect the floor, protect the room. Tex seemed to treat those rules not as restrictions, but as an instrument. The more carefully he played them, the more spacious the music felt for everyone else. That's why his presence reads as calm even when the track is hot. He isn't suppressing energy, he's organizing it. South Philadelphia also calibrated his ambitions. The neighborhood's horizon was practical. Get the step right, get your friend home, get up tomorrow and do it again. When the national spotlight arrived, it found a dancer already fluent in small stewardship. Under brighter bulbs, his economy hardened into style, his manners into method. If other kids chased air, Tex conserved it, spending only what the song would repay. The result was not austerity, but confidence, the kind that lets another person shine because you know exactly where your own edges are. That, finally, is the neighborhood speaking. Make room, keep time, leave things better than you found them. Television didn't just beam images, it exported habits. In the late 50s, after-school America learned posture and permission from a studio in Philadelphia, and the lessons traveled faster than letters. Fans wrote in careful script about the couples they loved, and again, one truth repeats between the lines. Flash starts a conversation, steadiness sustains it. Edward, Tex Connor, and Janet Hamill became the pair you could copy without fear. A twister might dazzle you into silence. Tex and Janet coaxed you onto the floor. Their lines read at kitchen scale. 8 counts you could fit between a table and a fridge, a turn that wouldn't knock over a chair. The nation learned that elegance could be kind. Fan club bulletins and penciled photobacks made a quiet canon. Justine and Bob, Arlene and Kenny, Bunny, and whomever the afternoon assigned, names braided with exclamation points. In that braid, Janet and Tex sits like a sensible knot, practical, trusted, used every day. Teachers noticed it in school dances, church socials noticed it at once. You didn't need perfect shoes. You needed a predictable lead and a partner who believed you could finish the sentence. The show supplied the model. The country provided proof. By Friday, 1 million gym floors echoed with borrowed diagonals. What audiences rarely clock is the micro-pedagogy inside those routines. Tex's lead hand is a thesis about consent, clear direction, zero coercion. His right side connection says, I have you, go ahead. Janet's carriage answers, I'm here, I will. Their shared axis runs like a trust fall in miniature. Translate that into living rooms, and you get the first generation of teenagers who learn to negotiate space publicly with grace. Ask any adult who came of age then why the era's social dances still feel tender, and they'll say something like, we watched them, and we tried. That trying became culture. Even the show's imperfections served the lesson. Records skipped, edits came early. A cable snuck into frame like a riptide. A lesser couple panics, a reliable couple absorbs. Fans noticed the absorption, a half breath before the rejoin, a softened arm through a crowded lane, a smile that said, the floor is okay. Those rescues were contagious. If Tex could recenter a spin on live television, you could salvage a misstep at prom. Competence, repeated publicly, becomes courage in private. Build this into your film with ephemera, index cards of viewer mail, a slide carousel clicking through labeled snapshots, the faint scratch of a 45 under the VO. Let one voice read a postcard from Nebraska that thanks Janet and Tex for making the first school dance survivable. Let another voice read a note from a shy kid who learned where to put his hands by watching theirs. Close the sequence with a kitchen. No spotlight, just a lamp over a linoleum floor, and a couple in sock feet taking 8 patient counts around a table. You can leave the TV off in the background. They've already internalized the signal. The camera doesn't need to teach them anymore. The habit is theirs now, and it will last a lifetime. Every live show writes 2 endings, the one the camera records and the one the dancers carry home. For some, Bandstand was a springboard. For others, a sanctuary. For many, most, it was a chapter neatly bound by school years and studio schedules. We know the outlines that follow. Janet Hamill stepping toward acting classes and print modeling, the trajectory you expect from someone whose carriage photographs well even in candid light. About Edward Tex Connor, the line softens. The public trail thins, as if he decided the truest version of himself wasn't built for continuous replay. There is a dignity to that quiet, especially for a dancer whose defining virtue on camera was steadiness. Responsible storytelling honors what the record can prove and refuses to embroider what it can't. The evidence we hold, contest placings, annotated photographs, fan recollections, describes a craftsman who did his work in view of a nation for a charged span of late teen years, then let that work live where it belonged, in muscle memory scattered across kitchens, gyms, and church basements far from Philadelphia. It's tempting to chase a bow that ties the narrative shut, a headline career, a scandal, a perfect epilogue. But the era itself was not neat. American youth culture atomized into 100 subscenes, and the kids who had set the country's after-school tempo learned other rhythms: jobs, service, apprenticeships, marriages, griefs, long jokes with old friends. If you must name a legacy for someone who exits without fanfare, name the habits he planted. Tex's lead hand, clear, non-coercive, outlived the broadcasts in the way partners ask each other for space. His economy, no steps he couldn't justify, became a kind of civic taste, more listening, cleaner lines, a preference for phrases you can finish together. Even the rescues he performed in the margins of live television, the half-breath before the rejoin, the gentle recentering of a spin, translated into ordinary courage. You could fix a moment at prom because you'd watched him fix one on a weekday afternoon. For the film, resist the archival reflex to pad with speculation. Instead, let absence perform as a choice. Build a late-sequence montage that breathes, the studio lights cooling, cables coiled, a door propped with a sandbag, a South Philly bus stop at dusk, a kitchen lamp throwing an oval of usefulness across linoleum. Under it, write a VO that treats quiet as craft. Some dancers chase the echo, others leave the room in time for silence to keep its shape. Then allow a small grace note, a postcard from a former partner, a fan letter folded at the corners, so the audience can feel the continuity that outlives the set. Bandstand made teenage America visible to itself. Tex Connor helped make it intelligible. After the music stops, intelligibility is what endures, the sense that time can be kept, that a room can be organized, that a person can be trusted to bring someone else safely to the end of a song. Perhaps he simply kept doing that, off camera, where most elegance lives. Stand in the old studio in your imagination and listen. Before the cue light, there's always a hush, cables settling like slow tides, a camera operator clearing his throat, a 45 whispering toward its first groove. Then, the room takes its breath and the count arrives. In that breath lives Edward Tex Connor. He is not the trumpet line that claims the melody, he's the sustained chord that lets it ring. The boy from South Philadelphia crossed two eras without changing his weather. Bob Horn's handmade pulse to Dick Clark's national sheen, the same economy traveling from one temperature to the next. Where others decorated, he edited. Where others chased air, he conserved it for the phrase that mattered. Trace the map and you can see the landmarks. A slow dance bronze in 1958, proof that restraint has a radiance cameras respect. A jitterbug silver in 1959, proof that heat can be organized without spilling. The prizes, backyard pool, French Simca, glitter like relics of a mid-century wish. But the keepsake that lasts is procedural. Invite, anchor, release. Watch the pictures and the story repeats. With Janet Hamill, he writes the grammar of legibility. Diagonals clean enough for a kitchen in Iowa to copy by Friday. In a rare orbit with Justine Carrelli, he demonstrates the portability of trust. Steadiness as a craft you can share for a single sentence and return uncreased. The floor remembers rescues no scrapbook can caption. A spin that overtraveled by an inch brought back to axis in half a beat. A camera pullback that arrives too soon, met by a shortened step and a clean rejoin. The public rarely sees the stitch. The partner always does. Bandstand's mythology has room for dazzlers and for anchors, for the stars who draw the eye and the artisans who keep the picture readable. Tex belong to the second category, which is the first requirement for every good night. Without structure, spectacle is noise. If you're making the film, end with hands. Not faces, not trophies, hands. Tex's lead resting exactly where permission lives. Janet's answering line. The soft adjustment after a micro mistake. The quick open palm that makes space for a pass-through. Layer the room tone under a VO that refuses sentimentality and chooses gratitude. Elegance is not an accident. It is a responsibility we carry for each other. Then, let the record run 1 second longer than the cut requires. In that extra second, you can feel what he gave. Time, organized and offered. When the lights cool and the cables are coiled, legacy is what the floor can still teach without the show. From row house kitchens to gym floors to church basements, the lesson travels. Keep your axis soft, your elbows honest, your partner safe, your phrase complete. Edward Tex Connor made those instructions legible to a nation, and then, in proper proportion, stepped aside so they could belong to everyone. The floor remembers. And, if we are lucky, so do we.